Hello, I'd ask my first and only slide be presented. My name is Jasmine King. My health and life have been completely altered since July of 2021 when I received the single Moderna vaccination. I was 38 at the time. It does take an awful lot of courage to open up to a group of strangers about such personal matters. Then again, the life-threatening health issues I'm facing have evoked a level of courage and bravery I could never before have fathomed. Before this vaccination, I was active, energetic, upbeat, and my husband and I run an organic farm, I as the grant writer attorney. I ran, taught yoga. I very recently had 2 natural births and was breastfeeding my 1-year-old at this time. I ignored the initial hit the vaccine took on me regarding this as, quote, to be expected, but the compromise on my immune system started showing within days. I had previously been able to avoid the dozens of annual colds my 2 toddlers get, but after vaccination, I quickly caught their colds. This happened again and again. Then a topical fungal infection, and a few weeks in, I began experiencing subtle muscle spasms and sensory issues. I constantly felt unusually hot, burnt on my skin, or as if something invisible was crawling on me. How odd, I thought. I had no idea my nervous system seized, which culminated explosively 2 months later. My back, arms, face burned as if scorched by fire. The pain went deep into my muscles, zaps and booms were sounding in my head. My glands all swelled up. My sweating became abnormal, making me intolerant to heat, and my heart rate doubled. Electric pins and needles, twitches and muscle spasms that were strong enough to jolt me in my sleep passed over every body part for weeks, and it was also aggressive that I could not sleep for 6 weeks. Then in late December, notable muscle wasting or atrophy began, and it began in a painful manner. While I'm told that Moderna's trials resulted in absolutely zero neurological adverse effects, there are thousands of individuals like myself. I found this out after testing positive, eventually that is, for an antibody related to sensory and neuromuscular issues. I initially joined a Mayo patient support forum, then found other similar forums where these vaccine-injured individuals are congregating for peer assistance. I also learned this upon trying to get into several prominent neurology clinics, and they're all backed up. Many of those injured experienced these side effects long before I was vaccinated, yet I wasn't afforded this knowledge. No disclosures, no PSAs from federal health agencies, and no media coverage about this whatsoever. Apparent from where I stand is a missed opportunity to collect and act on neurological vaccination risks in the non-trial population, to inform the public and disseminate the trend to medical providers, particularly neurologists. This lack of dissemination hurts my ability to be quickly treated, and I'd like everyone to understand that. It affects at the patient level. Now, I also see from where I now am that it is slightly odd and flawed to rely so extensively on self-reporting when persons like myself are going through crises that compares to nothing I've ever been through in my entire life. But it is even more flawed to sit on this data of the non-trial population for years to later do a look back. I believe this is the approach right now that explains why there's so little discussion of this. I understand from a statistical standpoint, but given what is at stake, I do not understand. Excuse me?
Can you please wrap it up?
Absolutely, yes. As you contemplate the decisions ahead, please keep in mind that there are mandates and immense pressures involved here. I believe there's more room for pairwise comparisons. For example, looking at my age group and health profile, I had minimum risk from the virus itself. How does this apply to young children? Likewise, just because of vaccination, but there's a lot of looking at the hospitalization rates of virus versus vaccine. But you take a case like mine, I haven't been hospitalized.
Ma'am, you have to end it here, please.
Okay, well, thank you all.
I have no conflicts. Hello, everyone. I'm Kathlyn Hinesley with Friends of the Constitution. Today I'll be presenting some facts for your consideration, but I want you to know that I fully understand how hard it is for you to be in your position and being literally inundated with facts. Everyone wants to do the right thing, but what is the right thing? That's a question that can be mind-boggling at best. I'm hoping that what I say today will relieve some of the stress and fill you with a clear and peaceful understanding of the truth. And now for the promised facts. The FDA is legally prohibited from approving any biological product for emergency use unless all of the following conditions are met. There must be an emergency that poses a risk of death to the target group. The product must be effective in preventing the disease. It must be safe, and finally, the benefits must outweigh the risks. With regard to the first point, children without comorbidities who acquire COVID-19 have a 99.98% survival rate. There is no emergency. Moving forward to effectiveness, a study by Kyle A. Biddy, which includes a data analysis of 145 countries, found that COVID-19 vaccines were, in fact, associated with a 38% increase in COVID cases and a 31% increase in deaths. Could these vaccines be negatively affecting immunity? The number of severe adverse events affecting children ages 5 to 17 reported to VAERS as of June 3rd was 8,811, including 114 deaths and 1,346 cases of myocarditis, a condition that can be fatal. We can assume that if these vaccines are authorized, some babies will die. The benefits of these vaccines are questionable and the risks are clear. Think about your personal priorities, your concerns for your reputation, your job, the approval of family and friends, and issues concerning the financial security of you and your loved ones, as well as your private thoughts about some of the information you have reviewed. These concerns do matter, but there is something that matters more. If these vaccines are authorized, some babies will die. If you were alone and saw a baby of 6 months old right in front of you, would you yourself take a loaded firearm and kill that child? My guess is the answer will be no. And yet, if you participate in authorizing these dangerous injections for this age group, you in fact will be doing that. How would you feel about that at the end of your life when none of the other things matter? How would your soul feel? That's all you need to ask yourself in making the right decision. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. There are many unanswered questions regarding the safety and efficacy of COVID vaccines, especially for babies and young children. I'm deeply concerned that the push to vaccinate these children is nothing more than a dystopian experiment with unknown consequences. Some of us have outlined these questions in a letter to VRPAC, but have not received any answers, and I'll post some of them here. The letter's at my website, gohmert.house.gov, and my Twitter account, at Rep. Louie Gohmert. But number one, why has the FDA refused to release the hundreds of thousands of pages of data from pre-approval manufacturer studies, post-approval adverse events data, and other post-approval manufacturer data? Number two, what is the cardiac risk factor in administering these COVID vaccines to children? Number three, would world-renowned immunologists have raised concerns about potential antibody-dependent enhancement, ADE, resulting from COVID vaccines? And since ADE was a problem in prior unrelated respiratory vaccine trials, we need to know what studies, if any, the FDA has that it's used regarding potential ADE from COVID vaccines in children 5 and under, or any age group. Can the FDA affirm that there's no risk of ADE for vaccinated children? Number four, if approved and widely used among children 5 and under, how many lives, if any, does FDA estimate will be saved next year? Given the injuries reported in the FDA's VAERS system, how will FDA evaluate serious vaccine injuries versus serious COVID outcomes? Number five, is it possible that the proposed COVID vaccines in young children would create increased risk from future novel COVID variants? Number 6, why has the FDA recently lowered the efficacy bar for COVID vaccines for youngest children? This change significantly lowers the expected benefits from any COVID vaccination for young children, and it's of particular concern given that over 70% of that age cohort are already seropositive. These questions and others are critical and deserve thorough answers by FDA and VRBPAC prior to any emergency use authorization with the accompanying protection from liability for all harm done. In conclusion, some of us have grave concerns that in balancing the risks to rewards here, all the risks are to the innocent children and all the billions of dollars of rewards go to the government-protected pharmaceuticals, leaving me to wonder if Republicans get a majority, may need to have a bill, I'm working on it now, to allow civil and criminal liability to vaccine providers and accessories despite an EUA, which should force more sensitivity to vaccine harm to our young children. We've got to care more about the children, and I appreciate the time to express this.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Heshie Klein. I have no conflicts. In his letter to you of June 10th, RFK said, and you have all the details, so I'll just mention the main points. There is no COVID emergency for children. That's number 1. Number 2, the vaccines do not prevent transmission. They do not prevent infection. Number 6, the Pfizer clinical trial for children 2 through 4 years old failed to meet the FDA-specified requirements for COVID vaccine EUAs. You're proposing to use a product and a schedule that failed FDA's established criteria in its clinical trials. On page 117 of Moderna's submission, they hid their clinical data and instead used a computer model, a simulation, where they adjusted the parameters to give them the results they wanted. And on page 118, they say the risk of myocarditis was assessed using a 7-day risk window. A 7-day risk window after Spikevax injection. How's that for long-term study? Pfizer claims that they did a study of 4,526 participants 6 months through 4 years old. This, of course, is a lie. Like Moderna, Pfizer found ways to whittle down the numbers of participants to force the data to fit a predetermined fictional narrative. Pfizer has a unique problem, and this may be one reason why it has taken them so long to get to the application stage. After Pfizer thought that this clinical trial on kids was going to work, so they unblinded it on September 28, 2021, and they started vaccinating the placebo group to destroy the control and eliminate any long-term safety data on November 3rd, 2021. Then in early December, the data showed that the trial had failed. So Pfizer had to scramble to enroll even more kids in the attempt to save the clinical trial with a 3rd dose. The result then becomes a complete muddle because Pfizer had to refer to the blinded period before September 28th, the unblinded crossover period after September 28th, and then the post-protocol amended 6th period, February 1 to data cutoff of April 29. I pray that you realize that if you choose to ignore the obvious that Moderna and Pfizer are lying, then you'll be doing a great disservice to humanity. You know that, and all it takes is for evil to win, is for good people to say nothing. If you remain silent and do not call them on their lies, you're allowing Moderna and Pfizer to lie to the American public, and at what cost to human lives. In the Purim story, the evil Haman wanted to kill all the Jews. Mordecai said to Queen Esther, "Do not think you will be able to escape in the king's palace any more than the rest of the Jews. For if you persist in keeping silent at a time like this, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from some other place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows if it was for just such a time as this that you attained the royal position." We are at a cosmic turning point in the history of the world. We are in a war between good and evil. And who knows if it was for just such a time as this that you attained your positions on the VRBPAC. You have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do the right thing for humanity and for God, and you will be remembered in the history books for eternity. I pray for you that you look in your hearts and souls and find the courage to stand up to Big Pharma, like Esther stood up to Haman and saved all the Jews. You have the opportunity to save humanity and the world. Pfizer and Moderna have not met requirements and should not approve. You know that. Stand up against them on the side of God, on the side of good, and may God smile on you always and in all ways.
Good afternoon. I'm Shae, and I have no financial involvement in this discussion. I am a mother, former educator, director, and recently worked as a tech manager developing startups in the health space. I was never exposed to COVID-19. My children have also been enrolled in private schools with zero exposures. Please recall these products immediately. Do not harm our low-risk children. They do not need myocarditis from long-haul COVID vaccine adverse reactions. We demand informed consent. As a parent, I wanted to do the right thing to protect my children against COVID-19. So I received the first dose of Pfizer on April 3rd. Little did I know this would be the worst day of my life. After an hour, I called 911 due to an anaphylactic reaction. I never experienced anything like this in my entire life. My heart was racing. I felt so weak, disoriented, and vertigo, almost like I was going to faint. I had severe chest pains. I couldn't breathe due to throat closure sensations. I felt feverish, but I was fine just an hour ago. My family was present, but they didn't know what to do. We just wanted to do the right thing. We were informed the vaccine would be safe, as our entire family and friends were all vaccinated. But I felt completely betrayed and lied to. I had no other choice but to call 911 for help after my Pfizer vaccine. I was asked to stay on the phone until paramedics arrived to make sure I did not faint. I honestly thought I was dying, and I wasn't sure if I was having a heart attack. I've always been incredibly healthy and in excellent shape. I felt like my entire life flashed before my eyes. My vision was very blurry, and I couldn't stop shaking. I'm still shaking right now, 14 months later. The paramedics finally arrived and advised me to take Benadryl, and I should be admitted into the ER right away. They assured me they would not let me die, but I realized they didn't know about adverse reactions. It seemed like no one was really prepared to deal with allergic reactions. It almost seemed like a drug overdose. I wouldn't really know since I never take medication, nor do I drink alcohol. At the ER, I was only monitored and prescribed an EpiPen, then discharged immediately. The doctor didn't feel the need to do any further testing, so I received no explanation other than I had an allergic reaction. I left feeling confused, and I still didn't feel well. And now I had to prepare to deal with allergic reactions when I never had any severe allergies prior. I only had a minor rash as a child due to amoxicillin. Prior to leaving the ER, I remember the ER doctor being slightly confused and clearly stated, only elderly people die from these issues. I was surprised he would even admit to that, considering my elderly relatives were just vaccinated. I felt so alone, so lost, so confused with no answers. I felt dizzy. My vision was affected. I had to take Benadryl and Tylenol for a week straight. They wouldn't prescribe anything else for me. They didn't think this was going to be long-term. I contacted my doctor almost daily. My heart felt weird. It felt like flutters. I wrote emails for answers to my doctor. No one knew anything. I felt like I was being completely ignored and my symptoms were dismissed. My doctor denied referrals to cardiology, neurology, and denied me of an MRI. I kept calling and hoping to get new doctors on call for answers through urgent care and Zoom visits. One doctor eventually prescribed me blood pressure medication for palpitations. It was propranolol. Did she realize I'm breastfeeding? I had the worst nightmares and ringing in my ears. I couldn't sleep. I was afraid I would never wake up again.
My doctor, your time is up. Please, can you wrap it up?
My doctor advised me to purchase blood pressure monitor and track my blood pressure daily. It was really high. I never experienced this issue prior. I also had internal tremors, very similar to Parkinson's. My legs were weak and felt numb. I kept thinking I'm too young to develop Parkinson's or become paralyzed. After 2 weeks of being on the heart monitor, I quit taking my medication as side effects stated and may cause heart failure. I was still breastfeeding, and I'm worried that my child will experience long-term issues from these vaccines and adverse reactions and affect his development. He's now under evaluation and may need to see speech.
Ma'am, you have to stop. We have to move on. I apologize. All right, next speaker.
Hello, my name is Sam Dodson. I run a podcast called To the Lifeboats, and I have no relationship with the pharmaceutical cartels. I'm schooled in electrical engineering, and 2 years ago, I'd never heard of mRNA, but let me tell you what I've learned since. It starts with the shot you told us stays at the injection site. We know it doesn't. You knew it didn't. Biodistribution studies show that it goes to every major organ, primarily the heart, liver, and spleen, where thanks to the highly inflammatory lipid nanocomplex, it transfects the cells. That complex contains a pegylated lipid being mass injected into humans for the first time ever, while the animal studies showed heart attacks in pigs after the second injection. You knew the lipid nanocomplexes collect in the ovaries, where they have the potential to cause devastating effects on reproductive health, yet you did nothing. When women started complaining of menstrual problems, you did nothing. Transfected cells in every organ pump out the spike protein that ends up in the nucleus, where it interrupts p53 line 1 and BRCA. You didn't know this because you didn't care to ask the question. And when shown to you in a study, you did nothing. Every transfected cell expressing spike protein risks autoimmune disease, the most acute of which is myocarditis. When people started dying of myocarditis, you did nothing. The spike protein floats freely in the vasculature, finding its way into the brain, breast milk, and the environment as the body sheds this protein in exosomes, making those around the vaccinated sick. The spike protein directly affects toll-like receptors and CD4 T cells, which are essential to the immune defense against these very viruses. When the vaccinated repeatedly caught COVID and suffered reactivation of herpes, shingles, papillomavirus in unprecedented numbers, you knew this was a massive problem, yet you did nothing. You knew that the mRNA stays around for months in lymph node germinal centers, causing T-cell exhaustion, because the Stanford group performed the study that you couldn't be bothered to do. And then you ignored that massive safety signal. You were warned about oncomers and the effect on p53, yet you did nothing. When you were warned about prion disease and amyloid as a result of the huge amounts of spike protein produced by these therapies, you did worse than nothing. You silenced those people who raised the alarms. You were informed of fraud in the vaccine studies, yet instead of investigating, you colluded with the manufacturers to suppress trial data for 75 years. Knowing all of these concerns, you now want to inject the very young who have zero clinical risk from COVID and for which not one single study has shown any clinical benefit. You have abjectly failed in your sole duty to ensure the safety of any drug given to Americans. The late Francis Oldham Keesley would have been ashamed at how you've turned a once respected agency into a corrupted vessel for the very corporations you swore to protect the American public from. If you have one shred of humanity left, you will recommend an immediate halt to all the shots and pray that God has mercy on your souls. Might also want to figure out how we're going to diagnose myocarditis in very young babies who are unable to speak. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Dr. Kathlyn Lindley. I'm the member of the Steering Committee of the World Council for Health. I have no conflicts of interest. CDC data from February show that about 74.2% of children have had COVID already. Over 150 studies show that natural immunity is superior. The infection fatality rate under 5 years of age is 0.1 in 100,000 or 1 in a million. The risk of the shot in the already immune is higher than 1 in a million. Both Pfizer and Moderna expressly eliminated those that were naturally immune from their studies. They did this to avoid the hyperimmune response and possibly death. Vaccinating the already immune puts them at serious risk for having a hyperimmune response. That means you will be voting for some children to have a severe adverse reaction and possibly death if you vaccinate the already immune. This is bad medicine. There is zero reward, only risk. These vaccines are not medically necessary or clinically indicated. Bayers show children ages birth to 18 who have been vaccinated with Pfizer and Moderna's vaccine have had severe life-threatening adverse reactions such as myocarditis, Guillain-Barré, seizures, and more severe adverse reactions of death. Article by House and all that was published in May 22 of 2022 in American Academy of Pediatrics shows myocarditis 2.2 per million cases, seizures 7.6 per million cases. I will share two cases seen by my colleagues. 14-year-old male double vaccinated with Pfizer vaccine has recent history of chest pain on exertion. Initial echo and EKG were normal. Troponins 22,000 increasing to 48,000 in 6 hours. Cardiac MRI with gadolinium showed transmural enhancement consistent with myocarditis. Case number 2. 13-year-old female, first Pfizer dose last August, had first seizure within 30 days. Got a second vaccine in December, had another seizure. then had a third booster, and now has 4 to 6 seizures a day. She was an active soccer player and a good student, now unable to play sports or attend class in person. We have no long-term safety data in any of these studies. The risks clearly outweigh the benefits. The VAERS reports 28,312 deaths so far in all age groups. When will we say this is enough? What is the magic number that will make a cutoff and stop pushing these vaccines? Is it 50,000, 100,000, million? When do we say that we cannot give this to our children? Their recovery rate is over 99.995%. These are healthy children, and the risk does not outweigh the benefits. These vaccines are not medically necessary or clinically indicated. No, thank you for your time.